Hi there, GMC owners. Today in your 2021 GMC Sierra 2500, we're going to be taking a look at and showing you how to install Airlift's EZ compressor system. And this is what our compressor looks like when it's installed. This compressor from Airlift is a nice, convenient, all-in-one package that comes with a convenient solution for mounting as well. And this is my favorite of all the compressor systems that we have here at eTrailer. And this is due to how easy it is to install and how well the package is together. It's nice that you've got your control module and your relay block and your compressor and everything right here. You mount everything up. We can do it with a simple U-bolt and clamp it onto the frame just like we did. Took probably 5 minutes to mount the compressor and all the components. Versus a lot of the other compressors out there, you could easily have an hour and a half in just mounting up the various components, and you haven't even started hooking anything up yet. This is also great because this is a wireless compressor. It has Bluetooth in it, so you can pair it with your phone. There is an included remote, so you can use that to air it up and down, but if you don't have the remote or whatever reason you can't find it because it's buried in some stuff inside your glove box or center console, grab the phone out and you can make your adjustments. It's cool that you can do this on the fly as well. So if you're heading maybe to pick up a load of dirt, you leave in the house with 5 pounds of pressure in the bags, you load up the dirt, you go up to 40 pounds, you go to the site where you need to drop it off, unload, you can then go back down to 5 pounds, and if you've got more loads to do that day, you can go up and down all day long to adjust your truck for the best case scenario driving situations. This compressor offers up to 120 pounds of pressure, so it's going to be more than enough for just about any of the airbags out there. Firestone does have some bags that go up to 150 PSI. However, in most cases, you're not going to be airing your bags up to that amount. Usually less pressure is going to get the job done. So 120 in most cases is going to be more than you could ever need. The only way I would say that you might want to want more is if you're planning on putting a tank on here and actually running some air tools on it. You'd likely maybe need to go bigger, but for an airbag setup, this thing's fantastic. It's also fairly fast. We can go from 0 to 20 pounds on this truck here in under a minute. It was probably less than 30 seconds even. We'll begin our installation by mounting the compressor. The compressor here is extremely easy to mount due to the EZ system. You'll get a U-bolt that comes in the kit. The U-bolt will just slide around the frame. Just make sure you avoid any wiring or anything. On the passenger side, on our Sierra here, there's no wires and everything, so it makes mounting it up over here extremely easy. Just slide that U-bolt over the frame, through the bracket on the other side. Then slide on a flat washer and thread on one of the nylon locking nuts and tighten them down. I like to go back and forth and tighten them down evenly. And then it's clamped onto our frame. And since everything is already pre-assembled on the bracket, that's most of the work done for you. So this is one of the coolest kits I think out there because of the way I've got everything integrated. Once you got this on, we can then move on to wiring it up. You'll have 2 wires that come off of your compressor, and you'll receive a wiring harness in your kit that has a connector. We're going to plug the connector in to the top of our unit here because we mounted it with the connector facing towards the top. So just push that in place until it clicks in, and then there's a red lock tab on it. You just want to push that towards the rear of the vehicle to lock it in place, and now our connector's on. The rest of our harness we just routed towards the front of the vehicle. Just head in that direction. We'll zip tie it along the way as we're going. But before we finish going up into all the way up into the hood, into our engine compartment, we got a couple of wires to hook up back here on the compressor. The red wire here, we're going to go ahead and cut the end off. It has a female spade terminal on it. That's going to hook to the single wire that's coming off of our harness that is just a bare wire. So this is that harness we routed forward. You'll see there's a red wire with a white stripe on it. So we'll cut this guy off, and then we'll strip back each end, this wire, as well as the one we're going to attach it to. And then we'll use the included heat shrink butt connectors to connect these 2 together. If you twist the ends, it can make it easier to slide the wire into the butt connector without any of the ends curling up on you. So we'll just slide it in, crimp it down. We'll then crimp down the other side after sliding it in. And then we'll use a heat gun to shrink down our connector. Next, we'll take our ground wire. We're going to use the self-tapping screw that comes included with the kit. We're going to slide it through the ring terminal on the ground wire, and then we'll use a 10mm socket to just run it right into the frame here. Trying to pick a spot on the frame that's thinner if possible. It looks like it's a little thinner here. That way it'll drill in easier. Make sure it's nice and snug, and then we'll finish routing our wires up into our engine compartment. Once we got our wire routed up down below on the frame where it hits our fender liner down there, we can actually just reach down and pull that wire up. The fender liner is just a fabric material, so you can pull it out of your way and easily shove your hands in there and pull it up. Once we get it up, we go ahead and zip tie it to the factory wiring here. And there are 3 wires left here that need to be connected. You'll have a red, a black, and a pink. And these wires are taped together. You're going to see that there's little pieces of tape here where it connects to it along the way. We separate out the pink wire here at this point, and it goes across to the other side where we're going to need to make a connection at our fuse box. It's going to be a trigger wire. It's going to wake it up to start up the system every time you start your truck, where it just checks the pressure and makes sure it's ready for you, whatever you had it set at last. This is our power and our ground that's actually going to run the unit. That's going to go to our battery right here. So we've got everything routed where we need it. We can start making our connections up here. A lot of this excess we're going to be trimming off over here. So we'll move on now to our power and our ground. If we look straight down here right in front of the battery, we're going to have a ground bolt. So we can hook our black wire to that. So we're just going to separate out just the black wire first. So we're just going to bring it over to that point, kind of routing it around. And then we want to make sure we've got enough length to get down to it. So that should be plenty right there. So after we figured out the length we needed, we just trimmed off the excess. We'll then take the ring terminal that comes in the kit. We're going to strip back the black wire and crimp on the ring terminal onto the end. We'll then remove the bolt with our 10mm socket. Once you've got the bolt off, take your black wire, slide it on the bolt, slide the bolt back through the factory ground wire, and then reinstall it back into the frame. Now that we've got our ground connected, we're going to move on to our power wire. The power wire is not going to connect directly to the battery. It's going to connect to the fuse harness. This way we'll have fuse protection. So we're going to remove the cover here. There's a tab on each side. Just push in on those tabs and the cover will lift off. We can then take our fuse harness. We'll cut this in half. And then we'll strip back each end of our fuse harness. On one end we're going to put a heat shrink butt connector, and on the other end we're going to place a ring terminal. Doesn't really matter which end that you put them on. We can then attach our fuse harness to one of the studs here coming off of our battery. We're just going to do it to the one labeled number 1 right there. So we're going to use a 13mm socket to remove the nut. We're then simply going to slide our ring terminal of our fuse harness on and then just reinstall the nut. Our red wire now is just going to route over to connect to our fuse harness. So we're just going to kind of get an idea of the length that we want. Pretty close to this piece of tape right here. So we'll then trim off our excess and then strip back the red wire. This will connect to the heat shrink butt connector that we had placed on the other side of our fuse harness. At this point now you can go ahead and put the cover back on your fuse box. You get your wires routed in a way, zip tie all those up. We'll then be moving to the other side and taking care of the pink wire. We're now over on the other side. I've gone ahead and pulled up the cover for the fuse box over here. Our pink wire here is a trigger wire that needs to get power only when the key is turned to the run position. So that way when you turn your car on, it starts it up. We're going to use one of the fuses here that does not have power on it when the ignition's off, but does power up when the ignition's turned on. We're going to be using the miscellaneous ignition fuse. It's located right here. It's fuse number 40 on the label on the lid for your fuse box cover. So we're going to go ahead and pull this out. I've already tested this wire to verify that this one does not have power when the key's off, but does when it's on. Another thing you would want to verify is which leg of the fuse is the hot leg of the fuse. I've already done this, and it's going to be the leg towards the center of the vehicle, not the outside one. And to do that, you just stick your test light in there and have an assistant, or you could turn the test light on yourself, turn the ignition on yourself, and see if it lights the test light which leg. That's important because we're going to be using a fuse tap, which you can get here at etrailer. And in order to have proper fuse protection, this leg here on the fuse tap needs to be connected to the power leg. That way it goes up this leg and it sends it through our fuses so we're protected, and then out to our accessory here. There's 2 slots on this for 2 fuses. The fuse that we pulled out, we're going to insert into the bottom slot down there. And then the top slot is for our accessory that we're going to be adding. We're going to use just a 5 amp fuse for that because this is not a current drawing wire. Really, it doesn't draw a lot of power. It's just a trigger wire. So 5 amps will be plenty. Now the fuse tap doesn't come with any fuses, so that 5 amp fuse you will have to purchase separately. You can get that here at etrailer as well. These are micro-sized fuses, so you will want to make sure you get the right one. So we know our fuse tap's going to be inserted like this. Again, we're just going to match up the length of wire. That's going to work out for us, so about right there. We'll cut off excess pink wire that we don't need, strip back the pink wire, and then the butt connector is already pre-attached onto our fuse tap. So you'll just need to slide those together and then crimp it down. And then we're just going to insert that fuse tap now. Again, it's going to face this direction. And our wire, you can just kind of tuck around components as necessary to give it a decent home. Here is where we're going to have the wire come out, right where this is right here, because you can see we do have kind of a pre-notch already cut out of our cover, but some of this section right here, we are going to have to trim out in between this in order for our wire to pass through. You can do that with your snips pretty easily. You just come in and just put a little snip there, and if you put a snip on the other side, then we can come here in the middle, and this section will actually just kind of fold down, and we can bring it out of there. So we're just going to just get a chunk of this out of here in the middle for our wire to pass through. Once you've got that opened up, you can then reinstall the cover. Next, we're going to be hooking in our air lines. Now you want to have your airbags already installed before doing this. And we're going to take the air line that comes with our kit. This is the outlet here that's going to go to the bags. It's just a quick connect fitting, and every fitting we're going to be using here for our air line is going to be quick connect, so it's all going to be exactly the same. They just push together to hook them in, push it, and I like to give it a pull to make sure it's locked in there, and that's it. If you were to need to remove the line for whatever reason, if you push it on the ring here, that's the release, and then you can just pull it right back out. So I'm going to go ahead and plug it in here, and then I'm going to route these lines back towards our airbags, and then I'll show you the path that I took to get it there. After inserting our air line into our compressor, we go back and stay on top of the frame. Going all the way back, we zip tie it to the cab mounts here on the frame on our way as we continue along. That way it keeps it up above that exhaust right there. We stay pretty far away from it by doing so. Once we get back just here to where our shock is on top of the frame, this is where we actually insert the T-fitting that comes in our kit. So we cut the line right here, we slid one end of it into the T-fitting. The other end here actually runs down, and it comes from our airbag. We just cut the air line and we put it through the little opening in the heat shield and then plug into that T-fitting. The last part of our T-fitting here, this air line runs across to the other side, and we stay above the heat shield that runs across. So we'll head underneath, but you won't really be able to see this line until it comes out the other side of the heat shield. And here you can see our line going across, staying above the heat shield. Once we get across to the other side, we zip tie it to the factory wiring and go back towards our airbag. Once we got back to where the line was on our airbag, this is the Firestone line that was there. We just cut the Firestone line, we plug one end into the fitting. Here's from our airbag that goes into another end of the fitting, and then this is the one that was going across. This last piece of line here that goes off to the back is the manual inflation valve that came with the Firestone airbags. This way we can still use our manual inflation valve if we need to. One of the things this does change though is before we could manually inflate each side individually, this hooks both sides together, so you're only going to have a single inflation valve now for manual inflation, and you won't be able to change side to side. Now we're going to install the air filter that comes with the kit. That's this little gray guy here. You'll receive a little fitting here. Take your fitting and just thread it onto the filter. That's going to give us a place to push on the hose that comes in the kit. This looks similar to the hose that we've been working with, but it is a different diameter and it's a different material as well. This hose is much softer and much more flexible than the airline that we've been using. And you can kind of just tell here it's very, very pliable in comparison. This is going to connect on your compressor system out the inlet fitting right here. So we'll just put that on there. If you're having a hard time getting these to slide on, you can use some silicone or you could heat it up a little bit, but this slid on pretty easily. If you are going to heat it up, I'd recommend using something like a coffee mug, warm up some hot water, and then just poke the end of the line in there to heat it up. For our air filter, the tab here is the mount for it. You can either find a pre-existing hole to put it into or drill your own hole. The idea though is to get this air filter up a little bit higher than the compressor so that way it stays out of any moisture and filters the air going into the compressor to protect it. There's a hole right here on the body mount where it kind of meets the back of the cab and the bed here. It's the perfect size hole that actually fits our filter there, so it plugs right in, and then we can just route our line over here. We'll trim off our excess and then plug it in there. And then we'll just zip tie this line up to keep it up out of the way from hanging down. All that's left now is take the fuse that comes in our kit. We're going to open up the fuse harness, insert the fuse into it. We'll close the cover, and now we're ready to verify its operation. We've got our remote here. It's first is going to try to find them. So we see that we've identified this one, so we're going to go ahead and select it. If you have the phone app downloaded as well, you could also pair your phone to the device at this time as well. We've got our remote paired. You can do all the same features with the remote that you can with your phone. The phone's just a little bit more convenient because you keep it with you all the time, and the display's a little nicer than just this little tiny screen. But we've got everything we needed right here. So we've got it set to 5 pounds. Let's go ahead and put it at 20 pounds. We hear our compressor kicking on, and we can see here that it is increasing the pressure up to 20 pounds. And now that we've reached 20 pounds, we're going to go ahead and check for leaks. We're going to spray some soapy water on each of the fittings and verify that there's no issues with our system. So each of the quick connects we're just going to spray, make sure we don't have any leaks, and we'll also check back at the bags if you did have to make any adjustments there. We're looking for soapy water because we're looking for the presence of bubbles, and not just like the bubbles you see rolling down here. We're looking for bubbles that are continually being produced, and that's because the air coming out is going to be blowing those bubbles. Since we don't see any here, we'll just move on to the next one, and if we have no leaks in any of them, our installation is complete. And that completes our installation of Airlift's EZ compressor on our 2021 GMC Sierra 2500.